1 Samuel 20, verse 41. As soon as the lad had gone, David arose from a place toward the south and fell on his face to the ground and bowed down 3 times. And Jonathan and David kissed one another, and they wept together, but David more so. Then Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, since we have both sworn in the name of the Lord, saying, 'May the Lord be between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever.' So he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. Now David came to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest. And Ahimelech was afraid when he met David, and he said to him, 'Why are you alone, and no one is with you?' So David said to Ahimelech the priest, 'The king has ordered me on some business and said to me, "Do not let anyone know about the business on which I send you or what I have commanded you. And I have directed my young men to such and such a place. Now therefore, what have you on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in my hand, or whatever can be found." We read at the end of 19 that, first of all, he escaped to Samuel, and he runs to Samuel. And Samuel is up in Ramah in the neighborhood of called Naioth. And we read the good passage where Samuel was holding meetings, and Saul heard about it and sent his men to pick up David. And when they got close to the meetings, they fell down under the power of God and began to prophesy. And he sent 3 groups and finally says, "Well, I got to go myself." And the same thing happened to him, where he fell down, and it says he tore off his clothes and he prophesied all night. And that was the end of 19. But we find that David does not stay in this place, but then he runs to Jonathan. And in chapter 20, he says, "Jonathan, what am I going to do? I'm innocent. He's trying to kill me. What do I do?" And John says, "Listen, let me make sure. Let me just make sure before you jump to any hasty conclusion. Let me make sure." So Jonathan goes to some feast days, and when Saul finds out that David's not coming, he gets angry, and Saul tries to kill Jonathan, and Jonathan knows. So what we came across at the end of chapter 20 is Jonathan coming back, and by a prearranged agreement, basically he's letting David know, yes, it's time for you to go. You need to leave. And what we talked about is that this is then at a very unusual point in David's life. We had talked about the fact that David had been specially prepared by God to be a battler, to be a fighter, to be willing to take on. We talked about the fact he grew up, he had 7 older brothers. For goodness sakes, there it is. Right from the very beginning, if he wanted to get anything at home, either they spoiled him or they kind of made him last, and so he had to contend. And you see some of that friction between himself and the older brother, when in chapter 17 when he comes on the battlefield. And then we talked about the fact that he'd been prepared shepherding the sheep where he'd fought the bear and the lion. And so he had within him not only the capacity, but he had developed the skill that if there was a challenge in front of him, even if it was a giant, he was well able to go and attack it. He had that. But now it's a different situation. He has somebody trying to kill him that he cannot fight. It's the Lord's anointed, and David is acknowledging the anointing and the calling on Saul, and David has a problem where he cannot fight back. We talked initially in 19 where he was protected by the presence of God, but he chose to leave that. Then he runs to Jonathan to confirm it. And now here's the point that it gets to be, this is a very critical point in the life of David. And the sense is, David is a type of Christ. And David is absolutely a type of New Covenant, New Testament overcomer. David is an individual. We're going to continue to teach and show why this is the case. But as we study how God deals with David, it gives us understanding when he deals with us in a similar way. And part of our supposition and part of my belief and how I'm teaching is that David is in the Bible to help us understand what God is after in our lives and how to respond. And the first point I want to bring out is that David is in a situation that he doesn't really understand what's going on. Okay? He had been prepared in obscurity. He had been developed, he had a strong heart and worshiped God and was obedient to his dad. And in the Lord's time, God brought him, anointed him, brought him into the national stage, and he won a tremendous victory. And here he says, man, I got it made. I'm on the way up. And the issue was that now all of a sudden all of that is poof, disappeared. It was just like a morning fog, and now he's running for his life. What's going on, God? He doesn't understand what's happening, but he has to respond anyway. And the way that he's responded in the past, he can't fight Saul. So he's kind of in a new place, and and you've lost the bearings. And this is very important because there are many times God will put us in a place where we do not necessarily have our bearings. And there's new dynamics. It says, so what's going on? Why are these happening? Why am I having a problem here and doing this one particular pathway when I've never had trouble with it before? Now why am I having? Have I sinned? Have I messed up? Have I done something wrong? Why is it difficult? And then when you try to do something else, and Lord, why am I not getting traction? Why is, I'm not entering into your presence like I normally do? All of the questions. And one of the keys that we need to understand in our development is that there are times God will leave us in a place where there is no light. That we have to walk by faith. And that he wants us to be able to hold steady when we don't see things, not to panic. We don't understand why certain things are going on, but what we do is we're able to hold steady. He says, I know you're here. I know you're on the throne. I know you love me. And I know that all things work together for good. All things. And I can trust you. All things will work together for good. And I know that you're working in my heart, and I am in relationship, and you are working to bring that relationship closer. But sometimes it takes some strange paths. And as we get to this place where when we don't understand, if we continue to walk with God, that's the key. We get to a place where we don't understand, we just stop what we're doing. No, continue to walk with God by faith. Read your Bible, pray, come to church. You need counsel, you get counsel. But being in darkness, it says, I believe in Isaiah says, when I sit in darkness, the Lord will be a light to me. And Carol read today that the darkness and light is the same to God. I was also thinking from last night, it says he'll give us the treasures of darkness, which is a nice verse because that means that they're in dark times. If we're in dark times, there are treasures. Can anybody say amen? Okay, the second point is what I talked about, is that he's unable to fight his adversary, and he's having to learn a different response. But this is how I do, Lord. This is how I respond to this thing. This is what I'm used to doing. God, I want to respond and say, no, you can't. You got to do it. Why? It's like you get back. There's no choice. You got to respond. Point 3. What we understand in a sense now, and we'll see much better, the challenges he is encountering and he will begin to encounter on the run are going to put him in a position where God is going to be able to bring things into his life that will qualify him for his calling. It will not only prepare him, but it qualifies him. We are going to see David stretched. We are going to see David put into places that he is not used to. The sense is not only is he qualifying for kingly rulership, but he's qualifying to be a type of Christ. There are issues at play that David is qualifying. Now, the other issue here is that up to this point, and it's in chapters 18, verse 5. It's in chapters 18, and I believe it's verse 14, 15, and 30. When David comes back after destroying Goliath, and Saul gives him authority, it says 4 times in chapter 18, David behaved himself wisely. There was humility in David. He didn't just take authority. He didn't get puffed up. He kept the low place, and he behaved himself wisely. That was a context where he was able to understand and work effectively and stay in the low place. this chapter that we're reading, David does not behave wisely. We're seeing David make some mistakes in this chapter. And the thing is God has brought David beyond his comfort zone. God has brought David beyond what was familiar to him. David had never imagined the life on the run. And getting put in an extremity, we see David make wrong choices for the first time. And it is an interesting situation that at times the same pattern will happen to us. We can be in an environment where we understand the dynamics, we know how to react, and we find ourselves in a new environment. All of a sudden we find that we're not necessarily making the smart decisions that we made before. And you can come under condemnation on it, and you can allow the enemy to condemn you. But the greater reality is God is teaching us something new. God is teaching David something new, and when David first gets on that level, he doesn't get it immediately. And in a little bit, you can see the parallel between what is happening with David right now and what happened to Abraham when God comes to Abraham and says, Abraham, take your son, your only son Isaac, and go and sacrifice him on Mount Moriah. There was a sacrificing that Abraham of obedience, a sacrifice of obedience to Abraham, and there was a death to self to Abraham at that moment. And there was a similar death to David on this. He had to die to it. He had to go. He was trying not to run. That's why he did the whole thing with Jonathan. But when Jonathan says, nope, there's no thing. So he has to go. There is a certain death. And I will say this, if you have a calling in a ministry, it is not unusual at times for the Lord to say, what do you love more? Do you love me or the ministry more? Psalm 139, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxieties, and see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. God tests the heart. Psalm 26:2, examine me, O Lord, and prove me. Know my mind and my heart. Being confident is the very thing. He who has begun a good work in us shall perform it. It is also God who searches the hearts and reins of individuals, and it's God who works in me. And there is a testing of our hearts. So we return to the story. David is in the region of Bethlehem and Jerusalem. Jerusalem is not yet in Israeli hands, and Benjamin and Gibeon is close by. When he runs to Nob in the beginning of chapter 21, he is going north out of this Jerusalem area about 12 miles. He's going north to Nob, and the priest is there, and apparently what we understand in chapter 21 is that they have set up the tabernacle of Moses again. The ark is not in it, but they've set up the tabernacle of Moses, and the priests are going through the process of putting out the showbread, lighting the candles, doing the incense. And this is where David runs to. Now, you can make something that now David, instead of running back to Samuel, who represents the true life of God, he goes to the formalized religion and goes to the structured, liturgical, formalized religion instead of going back to Samuel. This does not work out well for David. This brings grief and tragedy. This move and what he does here is he goes to Nob. But understand now, he's on the run. He's got nothing. He's got no armor. He's got nothing. Jonathan says, yep, he's going to kill you. So David says, okay, I got to go. So he goes to Nob. And what we read is he comes in and he sees the priest, Ahimelech, and him was afraid when he met David because David was by himself. And he says, why are you alone and no one is with you? And David lies. David does not say, I'm running for my life because Saul is trying to kill me. David lies. Not just once. It says, the king has ordered me on some business, and he said to me, do not let anyone know anything about the business on which I send you, what I command you. I'm on a secret mission from the king. And I directed my young men to such and such a place. The reason why I'm by myself is because I got my guys outside in the wilderness. I got men with me, but they're hiding, and I'm not supposed to let anyone know what's going on. Now therefore, what have you on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in my hand, whatever you can. He could be really hungry at this time. He says, just give me something to eat. The priest answered David and said, there's no common bread on hand, but there is holy bread, if the young men have at least kept themselves from women. This is an interesting thing. The tabernacle, remember, on the daily worship, they cooked loaves of bread, the table of showbread, or bread of his presence, or bread of his face. and every day they would bring in fresh bread into the sanctuary in the holy place to put on the table of showbread. Remember, in the holy place, when you walked in, you had the golden candlestick on your left. You had the altar of incense directly up against the veil in front of you, and on the right you had the table of showbread. And what the priest is saying is, I don't have any regular bread, but we've got some bread that has sat before the Lord, and it's been brought out because we just replaced it with a fresh offering. That's all the bread I've got. But the priest trying to be nice. Now, there's something you can do with that. I mean, there's some substance in that where David says, I'll take it. Anything you got. He is going in and he says, yep, I can tell you the truth. My men have not been with women. They're clean. They're 3 days clean is basically what they talk about in terms of keeping yourself from that so that they're sanctified, they're set apart. David says, truly women have been kept from us about 3 days since I came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy, and the bread, now here he's kind of making it, the bread is in effect common, even though it was sanctified in the vessel for this day. So the priest gave him holy bread, for there was no bread but the showbread, which had been taken from a holy place before the Lord, in order to put hot bread in its place the day before when it was taken away, on the day when it was taken away. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg, an Edomite, the chief of the herdsmen. He's watching everything. David's not done. David says to Ahimelech, is there not on hand a spear or sword? For I have brought neither my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's business required haste. Well, there's another lie. But he's acting out of extreme need. So the priest said, no, the only thing we've got is the sword of Goliath. Oh, it's in the tabernacle. The Philistine whom you killed in the valley of Elah, there it is, wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you will take that, take it, for there is no other except that one here. And David said, there is none other like it, give it to me. So David comes in to Nob, where the sanctuary is set up. He gets food and he gets a weapon. And he heads out. He left somebody of the servants of Saul who had watched it all. We understand from the storyline, we'll probably get this next week, that there will be ramifications for David. Here he is in Nob, and now what he does in verse 10, then David arose and fled that day from before Saul. And where does David go to get away? He's north in Nob, north of Gibeon, Jerusalem. Where does he go? You know where David goes? It says he goes to Achish, king of Gath. Well, where's Gath? Gath is down on the lowlands by the Mediterranean. There's the ripples of the ocean. There's the coastline, and he goes to Gath. Now, what is interesting about Gath? Well, one of the interesting things is that it is one of the 5 key cities of the Philistines, but it also happens to be Goliath's hometown. And what is he packing? Goliath's sword, which is really big. And I want to tell you, the people of Gath know Goliath's sword. But David is running for his life. David may not be thinking at this moment. You see him allowing some panic to come on him. Now, we're going to get to another scripture that says there's a possibility, although we don't read it here, in this passage, there is a sense that David chooses to go into Gath by himself. When we read a different passage at the end, there is a hint that David met up with a band from Gath, and they didn't so much arrest him, but they brought him along. And you'll see this, and we'll talk about it. But in any event, what happens, he heads in, and he comes in and goes to Achish, the king of Gath. And while he's in front of Achish, the king of Gath, and looking for favor, and he will get favor from him later. He will receive favor, but not at this moment. David right now is at his most vulnerable. Without arms, without men, without his mind, he's not thinking right. And the servants come up to Achish and say, isn't this David, the king of the land? Didn't they sing of him, of his dances, saying, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s? What are you doing with this guy down here? And you can almost see David when he hears these words going. And he's coming and he thinks he's gotten away from Saul. Man, I just got to get away from Saul. I just got to get away from Saul. I just got to get away from Saul. Man, any place, I just got to get away from Saul. Get to Gath. I'll even go to Gath, Lord. I'll even go to Gath. And he gets in, man, I'm safe from Saul. And then he hears these guys saying, yeah, this is the guy that's killed Goliath. And they got songs. He's on the top 40, Saul's killed his thousands and David's kills his 10,000. And you can almost see David go, uh-oh, I got a problem. Uh-oh, I made a mistake. Uh-oh, what am I going to do? Because Gath is a walled city. It's a gated city. It's a strong city. If he's inside the gates, he may not be getting out. And now these people are telling Achish, you don't want to be nice to this guy. He's trouble. So David's on the spot. So watch what David does. So David, verse 13. Verse 12, David took these words to heart and was very much afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. So he changed his behavior before them. He feigned madness in their hands. He scratched on the doors of the gate and let his saliva fall down on his beard. Well, grass doesn't grow under his feet. He's got a plan, baby. If I've got to act like a madman and just start, being crazy, I'm going to do that. So Achish said to his servants, look, this guy's crazy. Now, notice what he says. Why have you brought him to me? Do I have need of madmen that you brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house? What's interesting now at this point that we get with David is that we are now in the part of his life where he starts to write psalms about what he's going through. And so as we go through 1 Samuel and we get the story, there are occasionally psalms that we can swing over that he talks about what's going on in his heart at this time. So let's turn over to Psalm 56, verse 1. Psalm 56, verse 1. And the heading says, to the chief musician set to the silent dove in the distant lands, a lesson of David when the Philistines captured him in Gath. Oh, so now this says that he might have been taken captive somehow, and a band of Philistines brought him to Gath, trying to get some sort of reward from it. You're not sure exactly what happened, but you know that this is what he was thinking when he was there. And you can see David's going through this, and we're gonna walk through the psalm. You ever been in a place where it says, Lord, this is a tight spot? And Lord, I don't see how you can get me out of it. But if you get me out of this place, if you get me out of this jam, if you get me out of this problem that may even be my fault, God, I'm never going to doubt you ever again, and I'm absolutely going to serve you. I'll go to church every Sunday. Just get me out of here. Verse 1, be merciful to me, O God, for man would swallow me up. Fighting all day, he oppresses me. My enemies would hound me all day, for there are many who fight against me, O Most High. Well, there he is. He's saying, I got problems, God. I got a lot of enemies. Then he says, whenever I am afraid, what does he say? I will trust in you. In God, I will praise his word. In God, I have put my trust. I will not fear. What can flesh do to me? All day they twist my words. All their thoughts are against me for evil. They gather together. They hard. They mark my steps. When they lie in wait for my life, shall they escape by iniquity and anger? Cast down the peoples, O God. He's been running for Saul. He runs away from Saul and he runs into Achish. And now he's got to run from Achish. These are powerful men with armies. It just seems like his whole life, I'm just this little thing, and yet what time I am afraid, what does he say? I will trust him. Verse 8, you number my wanderings. You put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? When I cry out to you, then my enemies will turn back. This I know, because God is for me. Do we see any faith here? When I cry out to you, then my enemies will turn back. And he says this, he says, you know all my wanderings. You put my tears where? In a bottle. David has a grasp of a relationship with God, that God not only sees him and is ordering the wanderings, but he's with him, he's for him. He even bottles up all the tears that David cries. David has an understanding and grasp of relationship with God that we need to grasp. We need to know that when we're going through a dark time, God is not only there, he can use it for good. And if it's causing us grief and pain and sorrow and even tears, it says God will bottle those up. There is an intimacy that David is beginning to manifest that is critical to the gospel. Now, you can go one path and say, how did David develop? Where did that come? What teaching did he have? Verse 10, in God I will praise his word. In the Lord I will praise his word. He has a confidence of God's faithfulness. And somehow in his life and background, he has come to know the existing scriptures as they were, which could just be the Pentateuch and maybe even the book of Joshua, where there is a confidence in the revelation of God that you can find in there. And I want to tell you, we can preach Jesus Christ all day long, all year long, out of the first 5 books of the Bible. The revelation of God that's there. And David is acknowledging the importance of God's word in his life, and we need to be able to do the same. We walk by faith and not by sight. Verse 11, in God I have put my trust, I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? Verse 12, vows made to you are binding upon me, O God. I will render praises to you. We see David committing, saying, Lord, I made a vow. As you deliver me, I'm going to praise you no matter what. I'm going to give you thanks. You're worthy. For you have delivered my soul from death. Have you not kept my feet from falling, that I may walk before God in the light of the living? There are a few crises points in the book of Samuel. And as we've gone on, there are crises points, and maybe before we're done, we'll go back and we'll highlight the crisis point. This is a crisis point right here in the life of David. He comes to the recognition he needs to run. He needs to run from Saul. He needs to turn his back on Israel. And his first forays, going to Nob to get food and perhaps a sword, and then either being captured or running and allowing himself to be taken into Gath, was a mistake. He's vulnerable, and they could have killed him. And in his desperation, he cries out. And we understand that Achish says, get this guy away from me. I don't need him. And it says that in chapter 22, first verse, David therefore departed from there and escaped the cave Adullam. Now, on our map, if you'll just pay attention, here is the Gibeon, Jerusalem. There was Nob. He goes down to Gath on the coast. Cave Adullam is halfway back on the outskirts of the tribe of Benjamin's land, but out of the lowland of the Philistines, and he comes into an area that's getting up into the hills, but not really in Israel's territory. And it says he comes to Cave Adullam. At this point, God's purposes begin to get put into gear, and David gets on solid ground as God gets him where he wants, and God begins to perform and do the work in David that he has always intended, because David finally has gotten to the right place.